The Power Factor Show with Rick, Steve, and Caleb. Episode 57.
You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Brought to you by Safariland.
Rolling.
Welcome to the Power Factor Show, where I promise Rick won't sing anymore. I'm Caleb.
Right.
Oh, God.
I'm Steve. And I'm Rick.
And today we're talking about professional shooters, which is actually a way more complicated subject than you'd think it is, as we just discovered in our pre-episode breakdown. If for people who follow the shooting sports, if you've attended any number of matches, you'll see dudes running around in jerseys very, similar to this. Some will look like a dog threw up on them.
Well, first there's the NASCAR wannabe type shooter guys, and then there's honest-to-God ones who
have earned the jersey and that sort of thing. And then God, we could do a whole episode on, the people with the shirts.
I'm going to get flamed for my NASCAR comment.
No, but you know what? No, it's true, because I remember when I first started shooting IDPA, just IDPA.
Let me just make a prediction here before you go any further, that this will probably be the most heavily commented episode that we have ever done.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to get a lot of comments from this one. Go ahead. Sorry.
When I first started shooting IDPA in 2007, I saw no one wearing shirts. There was one guy in 2008 at the state match who was wearing an STI contingency shirt.
Yeah.
But now, fast forward to 2012, and you'll go to a club-level IDPA match, and there will be a dozen guys there wearing jerseys.
At least.
And, to the outsider, they look at those guys, and they're like, holy crap, look at all those cool shirts. They must be pros. But the fact is, they may not be.
It's an interesting point there is that somebody was posting on some forum once, and so they took their next-door neighbor or whatever to a match.
Right.
And they asked their next-door neighbor, it's like, what is your thought about all these people who are wearing all these shirts, the logo shirts and everything? They must all be pro. They are not pro, but they're all, apparently sponsored shooters, and they must do this for a living, and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, no, they're not.
I used to think that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, to the average casual outsider,
but if you look
it looks like everybody's part of a racing team.
I think the first time I saw somebody wearing a logoed jersey, the guy actually got a bunch of ribbing for it. Because he clearly was not, what we are going to go into as this understood level of professional shooter, where you're essentially an employee of, let's say, a gun manufacturer, and they're paying you to shoot their gun. And so this guy, essentially, who was a local club level, C-class shooter, was wearing this jersey, and people were, almost harassing him for, putting on airs, who are you to be wearing this jersey that makes you look like a professional shooter? Right. But you go to a match now, and you might be feeling left out if you don't have one of those shots. So, because we've tried to kind of define what a professional shooter is.
I think have to add a class to that too. People who shoot at the same level as the top pros, but don't necessarily have major sponsorships.
There's them. Or any sponsorship.
Right. So to back up, we've got.
We're going to be doing a lot of backing up.
Oh boy. We've 4 levels of tiers, we'll call them, in the shooting
3,
sport.
but I'd like to hear what your 4 is. Maybe you're thinking of one that I'm
so,
not. Well, hold on. Before we go into this, let's
let's back up some more.
Back up even further yet. The issue now, it seems like these days, is that IPSC or IDPA competitions started out, for the most part, as an amateur sport. I mean, people did it for fun.
Right.
And then throughout the years, you have people who become fairly good, then get picked up by somebody in the shooting industry, Smith & Wesson, Springfield Armory, Glock, whatever, and then all of a sudden their job 24/7 is shooting for that company, practicing, being sent to matches, representing them, and becoming a high-level shooter. The problem is that you have this group of people competing head-to-head against everybody else.
Amateurs, right.
The people who are not industry-sponsored shooters, but when it comes to the end of the match, they're all grouped together as the same group of people. And clearly, if your job is to shoot, go to matches, represent the company, you've got an endless supply of ammo, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, or whatever the case is, that you can go to the range and shoot, you're going to get good. And how can anybody else who has a normal job compete against those people? And you can't.
Right,
Well,
but are you competing against them?
I have a counter to that
You
that I
are.
just thought of. So we'll
If you win the, if you go to the nationals,
Lost.
You're competing against
Dave
probably depending on pick a division, all right?
Right,
Let's
right.
pick open division.
Right.
You know, you're going to be
Max.
Exactly. I didn't say
Yeah, okay,
more.
but if you're a C-class shooter and you go to nationals, are you expecting to beat the pro shooter?
No,
or are you expecting to win your
but
class?
But
I'm
what if you're a
saying
GM?
as hard as you push, let's say, you push, and eventually someday you make it to master or grandmaster. Let's say grandmaster. We know some grandmasters who are really good grandmasters, but they are amateur grandmasters. And how are they going to compete against the professional grandmasters without that endless supply?
Well, the
of
professional grandmaster might argue that they put in the time and practice necessary to get to be the GM among GMs, and that's why they deserve the
But
sponsorship.
it could be
they
that
earned
they
it.
put in that time as necessary to make it to that very bottom level, and then all of a sudden they got sponsorship, and they're like at the bottom of Grandmaster, and all of a sudden, blam! They're like untouchable. But the thing is, you're shooting against them as another Grandmaster.
Yeah,
So
and if, obviously I'm not going to have to concern myself with what happens among the
Distinguished
grandmasters.
masters.
I go to a match and I hope to do well within my class, but this topic is where I see the issue is you've got essentially a sport that's built on the labors of the membership, and then you have those same people who are laboring, funding these matches at which these professional shooters dominate.
right.
So you've got, the sport has always, in terms of membership numbers, been dominated, say, by B and C class shooters. So I go to a match, I pay a $250 match fee, so that one of 5 guys who I see in advance are signed up for the match can win a new gun. And and
If it makes you feel better, they usually just sell those guns.
yeah, I know. But that's the part. That's the part about the pro-am aspect of it that I see is that you've got a certain elite level of competitor
Right.
at the top who is essentially having their livelihood funded by all the people at the bottom. And so,
Well,
is that the way it's supposed to be, or that's just the way it's evolved? Should anything be done about that?
You're not going to get a word in.
No,
You're
I'm just
gonna
gonna
get a word.
I'm just
You're
gonna
not
interrupt you guys.
shut up.
Well,
Let's go 1, 2, 3, 2, 1.
To back things up, again, further backing up, kind of what we're talking about is there's a stratification
We
in
keep
the
backing
shooting
up, We're going
sports.
to be in last week here pretty soon. But
Well, that was a good episode, though. So you have at the top, you have your professional shooters, and what we've kind of our definition for that is someone who it is part of their job description to go shoot guns, practice shooting guns, and they are, they're expected to perform well at these major matches, whether it's within their class or win the match overall. I would, and now the next tier to
I'm
that.
just going to make the comment of, and pretty much you could guarantee that all these professional shooters are grandmasters, but
Right.
that clearly is not the case.
That's not the
So,
case. No,
yeah.
Right.
no.
Some of them are a lot lower.
Yeah.
but,
Well, and I'll put myself out there. It's part of my job. Part of what I do for work for Gun Up is go shoot matches, and I get paid to do that.
Right.
But back to what you said about the advantage. Last year, I had some great sponsors that helped me out, and I went from D class to A class in L10 in the course of a year and 30,000
So
rounds.
you're a perfect poster boy for what we're talking
Exactly.
about. Yeah.
So you have your professional shooters, guys who get paid to do it. They represent Glock or Springfield Armory or Smith & Wesson or something like that. I would say next to that you have guys who have real jobs outside of it, and partial sponsorships who compete with those. So Vogel is a great example of that. He's a full-time cop.
Right.
He is not a professional in the sense that we look at Rob Leatham as a professional shooter.
Now, let me ask this
But-
question. In terms of a full-time cop, because I don't know what his job is, but if he was a full-time cop who happened to be a trainer who was spending all of his time at the range, that blurs the line, because all of a sudden you've got guy employed by somebody at the range shooting lots of ammo.
From what I understand, he's actually on
cop.
their SWAT team. So wherever he is. So, and I see you're sort of
So thinking, what do the SWAT guys do all the time?
lift weights and shoot guns, from what I understand.
Yeah.
But so you have that class of guys who compete with the pros,
Right.
who are at their same level, who may not, but I can only think of really, one or two off the top of my head. Vogel, Blake Miguez, whose real job is a lawyer. JJ Racaza is a DHS agent.
Wasn't Phil Strader a cop of some sort
Phil
for years?
was, and now he works for Remington.
Right, but I mean,
So-
he
didn't know
made
that.
his...
When did that happen?
Last year, we were talking
Really?
about it at the Pro-Am, which we'll discuss the Pro-Am in a minute because we think it's awesome.
Right.
And
but
then,
he's an example of another guy who got
well,
into
he's
those...
also got a new gig now, too.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean,
oh yeah, he does have a very new important job.
Yeah.
It does
Mr.
seem though,
President?
that the people who, a lot of the people at the highest level of competition, who are not, who we have not identified as somebody whose daily, go to work involves working for a gun company.
But it does revolve around guns.
Shooting.
I mean,
Yes.
JJ is a
Yes.
trainer for DHS,
Right,
so
yeah.
he spends a lot of time on the range. But, so I think, you have that kind of top tier that we look at as pro shooters whose jobs, I would agree, revolve around shooting
Right,
guns in
right,
one way or the other.
right.
And then you have your semi-pro guys. And, this could be anybody from, a Team Rudy shooter to,
Somebody who's sponsored by Montana Gold who gets bullets.
the local
Yeah.
gun range is
Right.
like, hey, you come to our range a lot and we like you, let's put our logo on your shirt and we'll give you a free range membership.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those guys
Yeah.
are all how I would look at semi-pro, and they're probably not competing with the top guns for, high grand master or whatever the hell we
Right.
call it,
But they definitely have an advantage over...
because they
what
have
I would-
some sort of.
Yeah, I mean, if they got...
If I get 50% off reloading supplies,
That's money that,
I'm saving, yeah.
Exactly, that they're not having to spend on gear or whatever that they have now as a resource that they can go out and use. So, and yeah, I would define those guys as the semi-pros, and they definitely have an advantage
And then you have
over what you're going to find is...
the bottom tier, which in the words of Top Gear, we like to refer to as scum class. No, it really was a Top Gear joke. I'm really sorry. Schlub class? No. Everybody else. By the way, my email address is caleb@gunnutsmedia.com if you want to send me an email for
Did you
that.
watch the India special?
I did watch the India special, yeah.
Did you like it when the train ripped the banner? And
Yes. Oh,
yeah,
man.
that was nice.
I really do love Top Gear, by the way. So,
I love that program. Yeah.
British Top Gear, of course.
Yes,
not the American.
Top Gear sucks.
It really
Hopefully
does.
it'll go off the air soon.
So bad. Just import the British one, History Channel, seriously. But anyway, back to this. So, and then you have the and it's not the bottom tier, but these guys don't get anything, and they are the pure hobbyists. They're coming out there, they use vacation time to go to matches.
Right.
They don't, I know some guys who are, semi-pros who work for training groups part-time, and so they'll go out and they'll teach a class before the match, and then that's how they're out there. So,
Exactly.
Stuff like that. And these guys who aren't getting any sponsorships, who aren't getting paid to do anything, I have to say, though, these guys really are the guts of the sport. Because if you take out the C-class shooters and the sharpshooters in IDPA, and you just have a match, that's all masters or GMs, you'd have a pretty small match.
Right.
And it would be
Right.
cool, but it'd be a pretty small match.
Well, yeah, and that'll kind of vector into something here we're going to discuss in a little bit later about Strader's Pro-Am that he had going on, which I think is a good
It's a great,
solution.
and it's a great match, too.
But your point there, which was Rick's point, is that you have the C, B, D, whatever shooters basically subsidizing the whole entire match with their match fees for the limited few who are probably professional shooters getting paid by their sponsors. So, how much sense does that make? But we were asking the question amongst ourselves before we flipped the camera on of, can we think of any other sport where the amateurs compete head-to-head against the professionals at the same level?
In the same event.
In the
I
same
mean,
event,
same
yeah.
event.
Right. In the same event.
squad. I mean,
Yeah, well, rarely the same squad.
Well, in
yeah, I mean,
IDPA.
that's the thing that USPSA always is like, the thing with USPSA is that the amateurs can come out here and shoot in the same squad as the professional shooters. Okay, that's true.
Sort
But
of.
what we're talking, if you can get, that's a good point. When they put together the super squad, there's no way in hell that you're
you
getting on
can
that.
squad with a pro shooter probably at an area match
Yeah.
or a section or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right.
But you won't be squatted with a pro at nationals or
No.
Steel Challenge.
No. But in terms of just the overall competition, like you're saying, the same event, that they're competing at the same level. Now, I don't know golf at all, but golf probably started out as an amateur sport at some point years ago, And
400 years ago.
Yeah.
In Scotland.
Yeah, when they're using rocks.
And wood sticks. Small human heads.
But at any rate, at some point during history, obviously you had the professional golfers who decided to make a career out of it. So the question is, and none of us know the answer because none of us play golf, but if you went to a major tournament, in terms of the final results...
You have to win your way into the pro tournament.
Okay.
That's
They
the
have
thing.
a qualifying round?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and to get onto the PGA, the Professional Golfers Tournament, where, Tiger Woods plays and, the VJ whatever plays, you have to qualify to get in there. And if you qualify, you are automatically no longer an amateur. You are now a pro playing on the PGA.
Right.
If anybody knows, if I'm totally wrong and you guys know the difference, please let us know, because
like I said, we're probably
swinging in
going to
the
get
dark.
a ton of email on this one. So, and this whole entire discussion is actually not just focused to, at least what I've seen now, pistol competition alone. I've mentioned before that I'm getting involved more with the shotgun sports, not competitively, but I'm following it more. And
are there pros like shotgun guys?
Oh, geez. Oh, yeah.
I take that as a yes.
And they have now, there's a big discussion about making a pro class for them. People who literally, they are going about this from the professional standpoint of guys, obviously that are in it for money.
Mm-hmm. Well, apparently I know that the range at which I shoot, the shotgunners generate more revenue than the pistol groups do. But a lot of that money goes out in the form.
Well, I've been shooting Skeeto down there a whole lot more, so it's probably because of me. But
right, but at the local level, when we shoot a pistol match, there's no expectation of there being prize money.
Right.
But there's prize money in shotgun matches, even at very low levels of competition.
If you look at, we're not going to vector too far here, but in terms of IDPA or IFSC, prize table, if there is one, is usually some guns, some equipment, some, blah, blah, blah.
And a plaque.
You're right. Shotgun sports, money, 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 money. So if you're in it for the money, shotgun is where you want to shoot competition.
So I'll be resigning from IDPA. Now, so I think that's a really good transition to talk about the Pro-Am event, which we'll do here in just a second. Okay. So the Pro-Am is actually a match that stratifies in between professional shooters and amateur shooters. Phil Strader, who is now the El Presidente of USPSA, so long live the president.
Everybody turn around, face up range, and then turn it.
That was actually funny. If you don't laugh at that, you're a bad person. But, so anyway, so the Pro-Am, what it does is it breaks shooters down into your two categories, your professionals and your amateurs.
Now, what do they define as a professional?
A professional, according to the rule book, and Phil, I'm sorry if I get this wrong, but a professional is someone who has won a USPSA Nationals within the last X number of years, whether it's in open, limited, or production.
So it is purely based on performance.
You have to have won that division in the last X number of years, or you had to have gotten an invite to the pro class from Phil for the very first match.
Okay.
So people who got invites, were generally the recognized top bosses of the thing. The other way to become a pro is to win either the open or the limited amateur class at the Pro-Am.
Okay. So what's the advantage of being a pro?
So the difference is money. So how it works at the Pro-Am is the amateur class plays for the prize table. So in amateur class, if you're a first amateur, you walk the prize table first. Second amateur, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, they have a great prize table. I finished in the top 20 somewhere, and I actually got a pretty decent prize from the prize table. So it was a really good prize table. If you can shoot it, I recommend it. The pros play for cash. So each stage is worth $500. So the format of the Pro-Am, I'll have to back up a little bit. The format of the Pro-Am is all falling steel. Every stage is all steel targets, and you have
Rick
a part-time.
would love that match.
And worse, you have a part-time. So you have to engage all the steel within the part-time.
Yeah.
The part-time for open is shorter than the part-time for limited.
Okay, yeah.
And your score...
Jim Scouten did an episode on this here a couple of weeks or months or whatever. That was actually really interesting looking.
It really is a great match.
And Manny came out with this strategy.
The home
that was
run.
Completely exactly.
I was there when he did it.
That was interesting.
Awesome. So your score is the number of plates that you knock down inside the part-time. Shots over the part-time are a -1 penalty if they miss a plate. If they hit a plate, it's no penalty.
There are so many plates that nobody's expecting to clean them all, and that's why it's plate count?
That's why it's plate count, absolutely. Okay. Now, the pro class, they will clean a stage. So if if two pros clean a stage, so say there's 20 plates on a stage, and BJ Norris and Dave both clean that stage, the money pushes to the next stage.
So if there is
then that next stage is worth $1,000. That next stage is worth $1,000.
Yeah.
And if there's a tie, and that's actually in the event there's any sort of tie. So even if there's 24 plates and two guys shoot 19, and that's the best score on that stage, that money pushes.
Right.
So, and then the overall champion also gets an additional payday on top of all the stage payouts. So each stage is worth money, and then the overall champion gets an additional payout.
So the amateur guys are not in it for money at all. They're strictly
in it for the prize table.
And the other thing is, I think I've seen where isn't the match entry fee for the pros considerably different than what it is for the amateur guys?
You know that? I don't actually know because I never bothered to look at the pro entry fee.
It would make sense because if the amateur guys are not in it for money and the pro shooters are in it for money, the money's got to come from somewhere unless somebody's bankrolling this thing.
The money, now, again, this is hearsay. I know that some of the money for the pro shooters comes from sponsors. So the match sponsors, of which there are a considerable number, donate X number of dollars, and that helps fund the prize purse for the pro shooters. Okay. So it's not a situation where the shooters' match fees are, being put in to help pay out the pros necessarily.
Well, you would think that, so if the pro shooters are pro shooters and they're getting, for the most part, paid to do this, and they're probably sponsored by somebody, you could have, say, $500 match fee for the pro shooter and a $100 match fee or whatever it is for the amateur shooter. And depending on how many pro shooters are in this thing, that money goes to putting together your pot at the end. And the amateur shooters, true, some of that money is going to go to the pro shooter, but really they're in it for the prize table, and $100, they're probably going to end up pulling something out the prize table. It's worth that.
If I recall, the pro shooter's match fee is higher than the amateur shooter's match fee.
I would think it would be. I think it would be subsidized.
And there's also only, if you count limited and open, so two divisions in the Pro-Am. Limited is anything other than an open gun, and open is open. So you'll see guys run their production guns, that sort of thing. There is a 10-round cap on both divisions. So even the open guys have to reload. And that's a really neat way to level the playing field. Because if you had, think about it, a 32-round big stick and you've got 24 steel targets, no problem.
Right.
But so if you take both the open and the limited classes and put them together, you're still looking in the pro category at 25 shooters max.
And how many shooters are in the match altogether?
Oh gosh, like 200, 300.
So it's literally a fraction, like 10%.
Why do they limit entry into the pro category? Why not have the more the merrier? The more money they have coming in, the more money they have to give out.
Well, because then and the way that the way that it's been explained to me is if you by limiting entry into the pro category, you actually make it a prestigious championship. It is the guy who wins the pro category beat the other pros.
Right, but he's going to beat all the other guys anyway.
True. To get into the pro category, you have to earn your way into there. It's basically like a badge. It's like, I actually like it because it's a lot like the IDPA Distinguished Master class, where you have to shoot your way into it. There's no way to shoot. I can't shoot enough.
So IDPA has kind of.
They have.
So if you kind of go back and go, my theory or my thought is that the people who are sponsored by the industry or whatever, who are, in my definition of pro shooters, are going to pretty much win everything. IDPA has created a division called the Distinguished Master, which the only way you get into is by winning everything, which means they are effectively pro shooters.
Shooting within 3% of the match winner at a major tournament.
Okay, well,
anyway.
that's like, Savigny beating Rob Latham.
Exactly,
whatever. But the point there is that their Distinguished Master is based on performance. My theory is performance is based, I'm not going to say this, but obviously is
based on
influenced heavily by money and support. They have effectively created a pro class.
They have. No, and I like it because if you look at the guys, even the high-level IDPA Masters who are going to matches, I'm an IDPA Master class shooter. If I go to Nationals, I don't expect to beat Bob Vogel. The list of things that I would like to happen, beating Bob Vogel has about the same probability as, a bunch of Playboy bunnies parachuting into my hotel room, which, again, would be awesome.
Your girlfriend doesn't watch this program, does she?
No.
good thing for you.
Yes. So that means so to our producer, that means the next episode, Playboy Bunnies, parachuting. Anyway, but so with the DM class, Vogel and the other DMs are competing only for that overall title. There's no first Distinguished Master or second. It's either you win a hand service pistol or stock service pistol, or you don't. Mm-hmm. And I like that because that's really all those guys care about anyway. They don't care if they come home with third Master trophy.
Right. They're in it to win it.
Exactly.
All the way. Yeah.
So you had a question about the DM thing.
Right. If I go to a major match, how are the DM shooters integrated into the rest of the match?
So the Distinguished Master is integrated the same way as any other classification of shooter, which means a DM, if they're beaten by a Master class shooter, the DM goes home with nothing. They don't get a first DM plaque or anything like that. If for a Distinguished Master in IDPA,
they're
it is
always only shooting for a match win.
Exactly. It's win or nothing, which I actually like, because if you reach that level of performance, that's really all you care about anyway. You know, I remember when I started shooting, I was like, yay, first sharpshooter. And then when I was an expert, I was like, yay, first expert. And now that I'm a master, the only thing I care about is winning my division. I don't want to be the Indiana State IDPA championship. I was first ESP master. One guy beat me, and he was the ESP champion. And I shot a great match. He shot a great match. But I was like, first ESP master. Well, I mean, it's a nice plaque, but I wanted to win. And it's the same thing. And I think it's great with the DM class that it's either win or go home.
It's all or nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I like that all-in aspect of it, because at that level, that's all those guys are really interested in.
But to kind of go back to our theme about sponsorship and whatnot, you could be a hobbyist and be a Distinguished Master.
Absolutely.
Professionalism and sponsorship has nothing to do with it.
Well, a good example is...
well, okay, that's true, but is it likely?
Probably not. Yeah. But my point is that Distinguished Master is performance-based.
It's so the Distinguished Master is performance-based, and then I go back and say performance is probably based on...
Well, so if you're an independently wealthy bachelor, and you don't have kids or anything like that, and all you do is load and go to the
race. You worked at Microsoft, you started in 1980,
But the road that we started down at the beginning of the episode was kind of separating professional shooters from amateur shooters based on
performance.
Is that what we're talking about?
Well, that's what I would do.
Or are we talking about separating them out because they're professionals?
I would rather separate people based on performance.
I mean, you could separate, and that would work fine, because if you separate them based on performance, my theory is that the performance is going to be raised because of the fact that they are a professional shooter. But you could say, forgetting that altogether, let's just base it purely on performance. I think the problem solved either way. My solution by creating a pro class based on that you're making a job out of it is solved by, in my mind, by the fact that you're saying it's based on performances. I think that guy's going to win anyway.
Right.
But but the problem is if you...
We're going to go 3, 2, 1. So
if you create a pro class based on part of your job is getting paid to shoot guns, then you'll have guys like me competing against the Vogels of the world, and I mean, I don't really want to get my ass kicked by Vogel. It'll take me, if I continue at the pace that I'm at, in 2 or 3 years, I would be able to realistically compete with a Vogel. But, for those 2 or 3 years, I would get demoralized because I'd be constantly getting my shit wrecked by him. Yeah, okay, there we go. So, if you guys want to send me 100,000 rounds of ammunition this year...
But wouldn't you have, let's say, if part of being in this elite club of professional shooters is that you have to carry a heavier burden of, say, because there's going to be cash payouts, your higher match fee goes to pay for that. Would I want to be a pro shooter unless... In other words, it'd be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The only person who's going to be in the pro category is somebody who literally is a pro, because I don't want to pay a $500 match fee without a sponsor there paying it for me.
Don't go to Steel Challenge. Holy hell.
Well, I mean, it's like...
$600.
Like we have a friend who, when he looks at match results, he looks at, like, top real person. It's like you've got the guys who are on the magazine covers, who are, who we all recognize as the pros, and then there's one guy who maybe is going to be 8th place or 15th place, and he's a guy who shows up on, for local matches and is a regular guy. He maybe practices more than most people, but he's clearly not a pro shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And does that guy aspire to be a pro? Does he want to be a pro? Does he want to pay a $500 match fee so that he can maybe win some cash? Or does he want to stay, I'd rather walk the prize table and compete against the other hobbyists?
So then he's a sandbagger.
I don't know. Is he?
Well, see, and that's the problem. I really feel like that would actually separate itself out, because there are guys who want to compete at that level, and they're going to do what
they're going to do everything that is necessary to
compete at that
If
level.
they're that good, they're going to be a pro anyway?
Well, and a good example, one of the guys that I was on Season 1 of Top Shot with, Brad Engman, he's a USPSA GM.
Right.
He's not sponsored by anybody.
Right.
When he went on Top Shot, he was a very new GM. And, he even said to us, he was like, I'm a paper
he the
GM
grip
right
angle
now.
guy?
He was the grip angle guy. He's a great guy. He's a good friend. So he won the amateur limited division at the Pro-Am this year. And I mean, he smoked people. He did a number on them. So now at the Pro-Am next year, he's pro class.
Yeah, is Brad sponsored by anybody?
No.
Literally, he is pure amateur. What we would define as
so
amateur.
if he wants to go back next year,
from
he loads
anybody,
40 Well, I don't know his full comp detail, but I know he loads 40 minor. He bought a bunch of extended Glock mags from a friend. Stuff like that.
If he wants to shoot the match next year,
he's
he
automatically
has to go as
pro
a pro.
class. He can't shoot it as an amateur.
If the match fee is 3 times what it is for the amateur, he's got to come up with it out of his pockets if he's not sponsored.
Well, he's probably going to be sponsored.
Well, but my point is that
sponsor Brad. He's a good guy. He's good people. He's getting married too.
You might have somebody who doesn't want to be a pro if those are the conditions.
Right. So what do? Do they drop a plate?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So, we have reached a point now where we're all arguing with each other, and we would actually like to know what you think about this. I mean, do you think that pro shooters should have their own competition division? Do you think that semi-pro shooters should be in with them, or they should shoot separately? Do you think that, like we do, that I think we all agree that the marksman sharpshooter C class is very much the backbone of the sport.
True.
And without that, I'm just standing out in a field by myself, and that's kind of boring. So
Yeah. My gut feel, and we'll both kind of go through on all of us here where we're at, is, I really think there should be a separation between the professionals and everybody else. The gray area is what we define as semi-pro, where they actually fit into it, because you raised some examples of what we would define as a semi-pro, which is really close to a pro shooter.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is there a necessity for having a separate division, this next tier of a professional shooter, or should things just stay the way they are? And in my opinion, this game started out as all amateurs, and over time, through sponsorship and whatnot, that you have this new elite group of shooters. And I really think that for what it's worth, there probably should be a separation, because these guys are going to be winning the matches all the time because of the fact that they have resources that not everybody else has. What do you do with the semi-pro? Right now, I wouldn't touch it. I should say I wouldn't change anything. I would just still consider them as not pro. But that could be a gray area, like I said before. So
I think that if you were going to do it, and I can see both sides of the argument. I can see that a guy who is not a sponsored shooter could work really hard and want to go out and beat a Bob Vogel or a Dave Savigny someday, and I think that's a laudable desire for people to have. I think if you were to create a separate pro class, the best way to do it would be the IDPA or the Pro-Am way, and have it be performance-based, and that pro is, they're in it to win it, and that's it. Right. There's no second-place pro trophy. You either win the whole shooting match or you can go home. And, hey, we could talk about women's division in the next episode. So, Rick, how do you feel about this?
I think it should be money-based.
Ooh.
I think if you want to be a pro shooter, all you should have to do is pony up the money to compete with the big boys. If you go to a national championship,
and the payout will be higher for the pro.
Payout will be higher.
Right.
If you wanted to go to nationals and compete as a pro, you just pay 2 or 3 times the normal match fee, and that subsidizes the cash payouts or prizes for the pro shooters.
Right.
And anybody that wants to rub elbows with the pros can, just by ponying up the money.
Interestingly enough, there are a couple of people on the pro squad at the Pro-Am that did not meet the qualifications to be a pro. You can ask to be included in the pro squad at the Pro-Am. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. I think I would rather you either shoot your way into it or, you don't. But, again, we all kind of have our different opinions, and we would love to hear from you guys on this. So if you have a comment, leave it on Facebook or send us an email at powerfactorshow@gmail.com.
You can actually hit the website, too, at powerfactorshow.com and go to this episode number, whatever it is, and you can leave comments there, too.
And then you have to do the Facebook link now.
Power Factor Show.
Facebook.com/Power Factor Show.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for tuning in.